What's up, everyone? Mr. NoobTube Gamer. Today we're playing Homefront in 2024, 13 years later. Yeah, we got some online multiplayer going for this game. On PC, at least. On console, PS3 and 360, you're definitely not going to find anybody. Honestly, most of the time, you're not going to find anybody on PC either. I just got really lucky after so many times trying, just popping the game in here and there, and mostly playing single player, but just checking on multiplayer, see if anyone's playing. Most of the time there isn't, but I got lucky on like a Saturday night, I think it was, and it was actually pretty fun. It's obviously not going to be as good as like a Call of Duty or Battlefield, but people were hating on this game a little bit too much, especially the multiplayer. People saying, oh, it's nothing but a cheap ripoff of Call of Duty. Like, I'm sorry, but you guys know, like, that just because a game is like a military shooter and has guns and has a create a class system doesn't inherently mean it's a Call of Duty ripoff. Call of Duty started literally as a Medal of Honor ripoff. So we're going to have an honest conversation here. Every game is always like going to have some inspiration from other games that came before, and that's not always a bad thing. Like when we had a bunch of GTA clones back in the day, but suddenly we didn't have them anymore when we literally didn't have any GTA game for over 10 years. Like, I think it's honestly sometimes a good thing to have similar games that are kind of competing against each other. And Homefront was a game that held me off while I was kind of starting to get a little bit tired of Black Ops 1 in like mid-2011. I actually remember when this game came out, and when I bought it, it was during the great PlayStation Network hack of 2011. If you guys were around back then, PSN was offline for like 3 weeks, so you couldn't play any game online at all. And so I had the game, I played the single player, but then I couldn't play multiplayer for a long time, and I kind of just forgot about it after a little while. I did play it eventually, and ended up quite enjoying the multiplayer experience, but once Modern Warfare 3 and Battlefield 3 came out, Homefront was kind of just forgotten by me, and I never really went back to revisit it until I rebought it many years later on PC. The single player campaign is terrible. I think if you're going to get any value out of this game, the single player is maybe like, it takes you about 3 hours tops to beat, and it really isn't that memorable. It's just your generic FPS military campaign with characters that I already forgot the name of. I was just playing the campaign like maybe a few weeks ago, and I already, I don't know any of their names, and I don't, care. So, yeah, most of your value is going to come from the multiplayer, actually. And it has, your standard team deathmatch, domination, and other game modes that you're familiar with when it comes to games like this. It's good. I'm not going to say it's great or fantastic or one of the best online multiplayer experiences you can have, even if you can get a full server, which is very rare these days. And I'm sorry that I suck at this game and I don't play very well. I imagine most of the people that still play are like really hardcore dedicated Homefront fans. I actually had one person add me on Steam who had like 2,000 something hours on Homefront, and most of it's multiplayer, obviously, and he's like a huge Homefront guy. I'm like, how? Like I said, the game's fine, but I can't imagine someone getting into it that deep. But there are some people out there. So that's what I'm going up against. People who have really deep map knowledge and understand the game and its mechanics completely, which I do not and probably never will, because my playtime is never going to be that much. Like, I still only have a few hours logged in on Steam for this game, single player and multiplayer put together. So yeah, that's the thing with a lot of these games, a lot of these like kind of more obscure titles, is that you're very rarely going to find people online, but the very few people that you will, like, they're going to beat your ass because they know what they're doing and you don't know what you're doing. And yeah, I guess in a way that can be intimidating, but I don't really care. I'm not going to take fucking Homefront seriously, I'm not going to lose sleep at night over not being good at any video game, never mind a 13-year-old game that most people either never played or completely forgot about. One unique aspect of this game that makes it stand out from Call of Duty and Battlefield is that it has an in-game currency that you based off of the kills that you get and how you do in the game and how much time you're playing. You actually earn points throughout the match, and you can use those points to unlock certain things that you can only use once, like a tank, helicopter, whatever. And I realized that was a huge part of Star Wars Battlefront 2's online multiplayer, the one from EA, where it has a similar currency system that you use to be able to get better characters that you can play as, like special characters. Like, for example, if you're playing with the Separatist army, you can use like 500 points or whatever to be a droideka, and special assassin droid and all these different things. And then, of course, if you want to spend a lot, you could be a Jedi. But also, they had vehicles as well. You know, that big, giant vehicle with the chicken legs that you can run around with the lasers. There were so many different vehicles that you can use, like, with spending the currency that came with as the match progressed. So I'm like, well, they got that shit from Homefront, now that I think about it. Like, that was the game, like, that had that before any other ones that I can remember. I'm sure there's some that had it. Like, the Counter-Strike games had a currency system, of course, but that had more to do with weapons and not necessarily vehicles and stuff that, kind of acted like kill streaks, if you think about it. So that was a cool thing that Homefront multiplayer had that kind of differentiated itself a bit, but it also had perks, it had create a class, and it had everything else that I guess you could say is basically Call of Duty. But if I'm going to be real, unless you can get it for like super dirt cheap, it's probably not worth playing in 2024 just because of how small the player base is and how it's not really, if we're going to be honest, it's not a standout experience that you cannot have in any other game for the most part. Like, it's pretty average. Like, honestly, I would have never gotten this game and tried to play it in 2024 if I never played it back then and wanted to kind of like revisit it, because it was a game that I did like, but I never would have really had any value in it otherwise if I was just like coming in for the first time as a brand new player that never touched Homefront before. Interestingly enough, this game was developed by the same studio that developed a game called Frontline Fuel of War, which had a lot of mixed reception back then in 2008. But originally, they created a game, actually not a game, it was a mod of a game, the Desert Combat mod for Battlefield 1942, which converted a World War II shooter into a modern military game, and it is still one of the greatest video game mods of all time. So it's cool that this studio that started off as a group of modders doing it for fun and for passion actually becoming like an actual AAA studio. Didn't last very long. Right after this game came out, the studio shut down, sadly, but it's a cool story, definitely. But between the single player and multiplayer, it just doesn't really offer that much for anybody in 2024. So I'd say don't bother.